Have we had any apologies for today, please?
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Sparling, and substituting today is Councillor MacDonald, and Councillor Leveridge will be here, but she won't be here till at least 3 o'clock. Thank you, Chair.
That's fine. Thank you very much indeed. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Dan.
As we're talking about education, just to make people aware that I am the Chair of Governors at Plimpton Academy.
So what sort of interest are you declaring? Personal?
Just a personal interest.
Personal, private? No. Right. I need to declare a private interest in that I am a member of a multi-academy trust. Anybody else that's governor or anything that need to declare? Councillor MacDonald?
Chair, I'm a member of the Corporation of City College, which isn't actually a school, but obviously would have a close link.
Thank you very much indeed. Right. I've got no chair's urgent business. We've swapped the things around. So we've got minutes next. You've all got the minutes there that you're all happy with? Nobody's finding that a problem, right? I shall sign those in a bit and they can go into the records. Chair's urgent business, I have none that I'm aware of, which moves us nicely on to item 5, which is Plymouth Education System. Councillor Beer, welcome. Judith, always welcome. And Carol, always welcome. Oh, and we've got David as well. Oh, well. So what with, wonderful. What do we say in your multitude of guises? Very much welcomed. Okay. So who would like to start and open? Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and talk about education, participation, skills, transformation, and the plan for the department. The plan for education guides the strategic ambition and direction for the City Council in respect of education. It covers everything from how we will improve standards to capital investment we are likely to need. The purpose of this document is to set out the options for the future shape of education, participation and skills department in the light of government policy. Council's strategy and the statutory requirements placed on the department, the LA still has a key role to play in education, but it is so different to the one we undertook historically, and there will be need for change radically in our approach. The paper you have received details the work undertaken with schools to date across Plymouth to test their support for partnership and approach. 70% of schools have agreed to, in principle, to develop a more detailed business case which will be prepared over the coming months. This will define the scope and delivery of the vehicle to achieve the partnership to establish with schools to run the majority of services currently within the Education, Participation and Skills Department. Educational standards over recent years in Plymouth have shown some variation. However, in general, attainment has been below average for all key stages, and by the end of Key Stage 4 results remain below the national average in terms of attainment and progress. At post-16, the percentage of pupils achieving 3 or more A-levels, grade A to E, is also below the national average. The new arrangement would secure a long-term commitment to schools and support the work of the Plymouth Education Board in raising aspirations and attainment for the city. Recommendations are that Scrutiny endorse the attached report to enable the further work to be continued with our schools to develop a business case for future partnership working. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Judith, did you want to come in?
Thank you. Obviously, the options and the process by which we have engaged with schools to have this conversation about a structural change leading to greater integration, obviously that's within the paper. We have given you, because the screen wasn't working, actually just 3 slides which we've taken from the report just to highlight essentially what this piece of work has been about. So if the panel is happy for me to just go quickly through the 3 slides, it allows us to emphasise and interrogate the 3 main points. And I'll just apologise now if I talk too much, which I'm sure is a blessing for you. I do cough, so I'll keep it to a minimum. There's a first. I can see you smiling there, Councillor Aspinall. Okay, so on the first slide, what we've said is that we needed to take a radical look at how the department worked so that we can still be part of a system where we expect schools to sustain their own improvement, but we can also bring a very clear statutory view of how well we are including our children, making sure that they develop in every sense, in a well-being sense, and that they are admitted to the best performing school system that we can possibly achieve. So we reviewed our purpose and recognised that in line with other council aims, everything that we do is about facilitating partnerships so all children, young people and their families have the best access and opportunities. Again, it's restating that point you've heard me make, that we actually do not directly lead or manage schools unless they are maintained schools. And even then, they have, of course, a recognised degree of autonomy. So what we've been looking at is how we work in a model of partnership with schools to best meet the needs of children in the city, given that there are complex challenges and rising complexity and demand around special needs and disability, mental health, well-being, inclusion and access. The compelling case for change is that the department has faced some significant financial pressures. It has been reducing year on year. And whilst we've resolved these at the moment, there is a risk for future delivery if we're not able to get the budget to a place where we can deliver everything we need to and exploit the resources in the entire system by removing any replication or duplication. So we have significantly reshaped the department. We have reduced statutory functions. There's little scope left for cost savings. If we divide or reduce the offer any further, then that will represent a risk to schools who we support in that wider system. And as you'll have seen in the report, if we can't resolve the long-term sustainability of the department, then reducing services further would mean that schools were left without that kind of insurance policy almost that we offer when they have an unplanned need to which we respond. Because of course schools are also managing some austerity themselves and budgets which have grown but which also have to deal with more complex issues. So on the third slide, I just described there how we've been talking with schools about what partnership would mean. And by partnership, we mean it would be very productive, and we mean it's a venture in which council and schools have a stake in the ownership, and where we share how we will manage risks, liabilities, and potential surplus. So this is not a partnership where, we sometimes talk about partnership where we meet to agree something or debate something. This is actually running our endeavours together. An example of a partnership we already have would of course be Catered, where the council owns 51%, schools own 49%, but the structure of the board sees influence for schools. That isn't the only example, but it's one that we have up and running at the moment. And we have said to schools we are happy to explore any form of partnership. We've not gone for the Blue Peter model. We've not said, here's one we've prepared, now do you agree? It's all to be constructed together. So we've been meeting with schools, we've been talking through some of the thorny issues, some of the potential benefits, and as Councillor Beer stated in her opening statement, we've seen 70% of schools in principle want to move forward with us.
Thank you very much. Carol, did you want to add anything quickly?
Very quickly, Chair. I just wanted to say that you've seen myself and cabinet members and officers from the department on numerous occasions over the last 3 to 4 years, all around integration for health and well-being. And you're very versed as an overview and scrutiny panel about the journeys we've been going on around our integrated commissioning and all of our integrated delivery. And the bits that Judith have just pulled out around wanting to work in partnership and wanting to co-produce is exactly the same for this piece of work. I just want you to recognise that this is part of that whole integration journey. It's not just something separate. We're part of that overarching programme, and we're really pleased to be bringing this bit because we know you've been waiting to have a look at what we would do with the changes in the funding and the changing in the responsibilities. So welcome the chance for you to scrutinise how far we've got.
Thanks very much. Now, before I start taking questions, can I just ask you to clarify what are the council's statutory duties as far as education is concerned? If we can just list those now, and then everybody knows exactly what we're talking about.
Okay, I won't go into detail because there are 189 all of them. But the broad headings that you would recognise are that we have a role in monitoring, challenging, supporting and, if necessary, intervening in maintained schools. So that is regard to the running of the school, including their standards and performance. We are a champion for children in the entire system, so that means we also have a role in monitoring and challenging the work that goes on within academies. We have a role in inclusion and access, which means basically making sure that all pupils have fair access to the school system and can have their entitlement, if you like. We organise school admissions, we organise school places, we plan for school places, and we have a multitude of statutory responsibilities around special educational needs and disability. We also, on the finance side, still actually hold responsibility for making sure that there is a fair system of the devolution of funds, the formula to schools. And we also have statutory responsibility, which accounts for about £4 million of the department's business, for transporting special educational needs pupils to and from their school places. And those are the broad headings.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Right, I've got questions started already. Councillor James first, followed by Councillor MacDonald. You'd written me on there, and I'm thinking, who's...
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Me is Councillor James. I think my question, actually, is to Judith. Judith, when I first read this report, I was rather alarmed about the how children are being underperforming against the national average. In the report, it says the general attainment has been below average for all key stages. And by the end of Key Stage 4, results remain below national average in terms of attainment and progress. Also, special needs, disadvantaged pupils are being failed. Why is the education service system failing these children? Why is it happening? What's the cause of all this? Before we start talking about partnership between the council and the schools, shouldn't we know what's causing this underperformance? Why the system is failing these children? We have a duty to give them a good education, and it's not working. And why are more children being home educated? There's something going wrong here, and I'd like to know that before we go into this partnership.
Okay, thank you. And as you'll appreciate, it's a complex question to which there could be a really complex answer. I think it's fair to say that when we say below national average, it's a pretty broad church. So children in Plymouth start school somewhat behind their peers elsewhere. And then we've made quite rapid progress in the early years. We still end up behind national average, but there's been quite good progress. At Key Stage 1 and 2 in particular, by the time they finish Key Stage 2, we are very, very close to national. In fact, last year we slightly exceeded it. I think it's fair to say that my team and I and other educational specialists in the system, those who support the academy system as well, I think it's fair to say that we are not complacent, but pretty comfortable with the work that goes on in primary schools, because we can see a system in primary education where through collaboration and using what works, people can make the right interventions, have improved quality first teaching, and are getting the right results with children. So when I say that at Key Stage 2 we're behind national, that is a tiny margin behind national. And there have been good strides in Plymouth. The key areas for primary have remained around boys and about the progress that boys make, particularly with things like writing. But to be honest, we've become quite good, and we've just bid for, I think it's over £300,000 worth of money coming into the system to develop oracy skills. We know that will help our primary children. Secondary is a slightly different issue. It's a very different issue, actually, if I'm honest. At secondary, we can see that there has been a decline. It's been made more difficult to explain by the fact that year on year, the expectations of the system and the way that qualifications are described have changed. So it becomes difficult to do comparisons. But I would say that actually that's the same for every local authority. So that's not a reason why Plymouth would be doing worse. We did have, in 2010 and 11, a whole estate of secondary schools who were judged good and better by Ofsted. That means that they have not been re-inspected for a number of years. During that time, the system of secondary schools standing alone to a large extent, whilst they've attempted to collaborate on certain issues, standing alone has meant that they've lost sight of what really good practice looks like elsewhere. That's just one reason. They are also seeing a huge complexity in need and circumstances of young people going into their schools. So they're trying to keep up with that rising demand and that changing profile of the young people as well. One thing that we want to look at in particular going forward is governance. We want to look at how well as a system we actually have oversight and are accountable for the progress of our schools. And that involves us not just looking at what the council has a statutory function in, but looking across the whole system, the Regional Schools Commissioner's Office, the role of the DFE, coming together. That's one of the reasons that we propose a partnership, coming together and tackling some of the more stubborn challenges in our system as a team, rather than a rather more fragmented approach where people are left to be responsible for their own improvement, perhaps not knowing exactly what good looks like.
Thank you, Judith. I appreciate what you're saying. My question to you now, I suppose, is do you think the proposed partnership between the council and the schools will address these issues?
That is the intention, because whilst the partnership will to some extent seek financial sustainability and stimulate the offer in the marketplace, if you like, by providing trading services, essentially the partnership is about bringing that system together and making sure that if we want to look at something like leadership, then it doesn't matter who you are in the system, whether you're an academy, CEO, whether it's me, Carol, Councillor Beer, whether it's somebody in the DFE in London. However we look at it as a same challenge, and we bring an offer of different solutions that could be best tailored to that school or that cluster of schools. And the partnership approach is about us having the right debates. And I think that we've seen that it has been quite hard at times over the last few years to really ask the right questions of the whole system. And so it's really about exposing that that's what needs to happen.
Councillor MacDonald, then Councillor Dan, and then Councillor Bridge.
Thank you, Chair. If I can say, Judith, that I think my instinct tells me this is a good thing. However, the devil's always in the detail. And I think we're working against a backdrop of the fragmentation of a system of schools. And I think that must present a confusing picture to parents because of the range and type of schools. They've almost mushroomed overnight. And I think that at the same time that we set up free schools, we actually have very prescriptive edicts coming down from the Department of Education. So I think something that anchors and seeks to improve the local picture would be at the very least clarifying the situation in addition to the support that you offer. And I think that if this thing goes ahead, and I actually hope it does, that the parents can see quite clearly what it is this local authority, the education authority, is offering. I do want to just add a few points. The 10% of trained teachers leave every year. So the scenario within which you're going to work in and to offer to help and improve is constantly shifting, because we know evidence from some academies nationally that when a trained teacher right at the top of his or her game leaves, somebody of a lower grade is substituted to save money, and the quality and experience cannot be the same. So the world I knew isn't the world that you're going to be working in. So that for a start. I'd like to know that I did look at the Institute of Fiscal Studies, and the school's budget for 2015 and 16 nationally was 40 billion. I have asked for local figures. And that Institute of Fiscal Studies projects in real terms a cut of 8% per pupil. So there's another change or challenge. I'd like to know the range of spending per pupil nationally, the range, and what Plymouth actually gets, because there could lie another challenge. We're not getting our fair share. I already know that we get less than Devon. So I need to know some of this to make an informed decision. And you spoke, Judith, and you said that making sure they develop in a well-being sense. I'm puzzled then to see why school nurses are out of the plan, albeit we only have 19 for 99 schools, or 19 full-time equivalents. And I know nationally 600 youth centres have shut, and I believe that 387 million is being cut from councils nationally on youth budgets. So I think these things, while seemingly peripheral in terms of youth services and access to health within schools, if you speak of the rounded well-being and a wider system, I do think it isn't just about getting results up, although crucial though that is. And finally, on results, if I may, Chair, I'd like those results in quartiles. We can say we're below the national average in this and that. What are we with our coastal cities? What are we with our family group? What are we nationally in quartiles, our position? Thank you.
Can I respond quickly to a couple of the points? The national funding formula presents a positive move for Plymouth. The issue, of course, is that we've still to work out the local basis for it, because the national one says this is the national amount, with the kind of the basis for the formula. We then have to apply it locally. So that's a piece of budget modelling that is happening. It does actually address a number of the historical deficits in the Plymouth formula. It doesn't actually take us to one of the top funded similar local authorities. So the question is, of course, whether we continue the campaign, but that's a question for another day. In terms of those wider issues, perhaps one of the things that the report could say, I'll bear that in mind certainly, is that this report carries a lot of interdependencies with other work. So school nursing, for example, is in the work that we're doing on the integrated health commissioning for children. That's part of another report that will link across. So that it's not that it's being left out, it's just that it's an interdependency with this particular piece of work. Results, we can break them down into deciles. The only reason that's not here now is that all results are currently provisional and are not yet validated until January, at which point I can put them into the public domain.
Councillor Dan.
And my question sort of follows on nicely from Sue's. I suppose it takes it a bit wider though than Plymouth. In essence, I think, we have to do something. We know that some of our schools are failing now, thousands of children across Plymouth. It's not just hundreds. But I suppose I want to know is how we make the jump kickstart, because all school budgets are stretched. Scum schools have got deficit budgets. You know, there is not a lot of money swimming around the Plymouth school system which is not being spent or allocated. So what role does the Regional Schools Commissioner have in this? Because this is a big project which is going to benefit all the pupils in Plymouth. And, you know, the Regional Schools Commissioner has overview of what the schools are attaining. So where's their role? Where does their support come in? Because, you know, they have to report back to the Department for Education. And then what about funding? You know, other schools in other large cities where they've had an issue across the board with attainment, they've had extra pump prime funding put into the system. And it's almost like to kick-start it so that when you go out, you've got a product for the partnership which is, I want to say use the word commercial, because schools can choose where they buy services from big organisations. So that's the first thing. And also you talk about collaboration, sharing of good practice. That's fine, but when you're already in a stretched educational system, if you want to share the good practice from one school and put it into another, so the schools that's shown, are they getting support as well? So that you're not stretching schools that are already achieving so much that they take their eye off their own achievements because they're working so hard with other schools. In essence, I think it's a great idea and there's lots of good things in here. And I hate to bring it down to money because I don't normally. But actually, on this occasion, we do need some money in the school education system for Plymouth to help kick it off.
I can't say whether we will get more funding for this kind of challenge that we wish to bring to the city. I hope so. And in answer to your first question about where is the Regional Schools Commissioner, then I've been having regular meetings with her. And last week, Tracy Lee, the leader, and myself went to Bristol to meet her for a specific meeting around this question of what is it we could be doing differently and what is it we could be doing together. And there's been a very positive response to that, the result of which we're not yet sure, because it's got to obviously go to the DFE for consideration. But what we're asking for is that we can do something really innovative here and bring the system together. We can pilot something that's really not been looked at before, which is that whilst, if you take coasting schools, for example, whilst the system for maintained schools and academies looks very similar, it's worked in isolation. So I write to a school saying you're coasting, the Regional Schools Commissioner writes to a school and says you're coasting. What would it look like if we exploited the resource that we got and we did that together in a seamless way and we brought some synergy to that? So that's not necessarily the offer of hundreds of £1,000s worth of funding like the London Challenge got or other various challenges, but it would release some resource within the system. So all that is to play for, and that's what we'll be discussing at the next Education Board. I think the other points you brought about capacity in the system are absolutely acknowledged by everybody, absolutely right. That it's not just a question of taking the stronger schools and saying, now you go and support others. It's about building a proper framework so that support is coordinated, it can be brought in from outside, it can be developed in a way that means you're not just taking all the resource from one place and letting that fall over. It is the case, however, that I think we've not understood fully what it is that the stronger schools can bring to support other schools, and that's where we're now asking, if in fact demanding, greater transparency from schools so that we can really work together on using the bits of the system that work. It's also worth saying that it isn't just about the stronger schools or the schools that are achieving more bringing support to the others, because even in schools which have been rated, you know, a 4 by Ofsted or something, you will find good practice that could be brought out. I doubt very much whether the creation of the Education Board was universally popular, but because we've brought it together as an accountable system where the people who sit on that board are the MAT CEOs and ourselves, then actually this isn't a question of people backing away from the table, because that was never an option. And I have to say I've been very pleased and impressed with the way people have come to the table. I think people see when they look at the progress measures and the attainment scores, and things like the financial deficits in some of our secondaries, I think people can see the time is right to do something different.
Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Chair. I've noticed throughout this report risks are mentioned, but have you actually got a risk register, and how will risk be managed, please? Thank you.
Yes, throughout the transformation programme, we've held a risk register. Obviously, we mitigate in the usual way. One of the risks around this was that if we opted for the partnership approach and then that wasn't developed for whatever reason, that we might be left not knowing, you know, in 2 years' time what we were going to do with regard to the council's statutory functions. Therefore, what we've said is that should the partnership approach not be developed over the next 6 months at a feasible high level form, we will revert to one of the other options. And I know that's kind of dealing with, you know, the risk in quite it's quite a big way, if you like. It's not tweaking. It's saying if we don't do option 4, we do option 3. But option 3 would be that we actually have to reduce the functions of the department further, look at how we could work with other partners, maybe other authorities. So there are lots of risks on the risk register, but the biggest one we've to deal with is that this partnership doesn't emerge.
I think that's one that we need to take on board for a recommendation. Yeah, thank you. I've got Councillor James next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Is it a question perhaps to Councillor Beer, which you might want to put on to Carol or David? It's regarding funding. The dedicated schools grant funding is coming under increasing pressure, as you all know, and the Education Service Grant General Fund has been removed. So placing significant financial difficulties on Plymouth City Council. I think this leaves a shortfall of around £1.37 million, which we needed to be matched and a reduction in expenditure. Do you have any action plans to reduce this £1.37 million?
I think that relates to pensions, but I'm going to pass it over to David Northey to come in with that one, please.
Through you, Chair. 1.3 million is being a legacy problem. I think we've talked about it in previous discussions about going back to when we became a unitary and took on some of the legacy costs at that time. So a lot of it refers back to school pensions. So I think we've got a two-prong approach here. The first thing that we've done to ease some of the pressure on school budgets is to make it a corporate issue. Now that doesn't solve a problem, but it takes it off Judith's budgets.
Right.
So we're covering it from a corporate viewpoint. And then the second prong is I've now been tasked to say, well, how valid is that charge of 1.3 now, seeing as it goes back to 1998? So just interrogating it with the pension advisors to make sure that it is still a valid charge.
Okay.
Of course.
Could I just add something, Chair, just on the budget? So I think this is a really valid point. I think, as you know from other things we've brought, what we've tried to do in the department to absolutely get underneath all of the legacy funding issues we've been trying to deal with, all of our cost and volume, trying to unpick everything. And so when there are changes then in the funding that comes in, we can be absolutely clear what we need to do about it and whether we need delivery plans to deal with them. So David's absolutely right. There are always two-pronged approaches. The bit that David's talking about, which is in relation to that legacy around the pensions, all of the other delivery plans are in. When you see that integrated finance report that we bring with our delivery plans on it, that's where we pick up any other funding issues. And this plan that Judith's bringing forward is the one that we're trying to deal with, that will set Judith's department ready for the future with this is the funding as we know it at the moment. This is what we're able to deliver. The document you're seeing here is the direction we want to go in within the funding envelope that we've got now, because it is massively different to the funding envelope that would have been in place for an education department even 3 or 4 years ago.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Tuffin, Councillor MacDonald and Councillor Dan.
Thank you, Chair. My colleagues are much better versed in education than I am, so I won't pretend it's my area. But like Councillor James, I have some concerns about some of these young people who I feel the schools are failing, if I'm honest. I can't view it in any other way. And how we turn that around, because this council spends a lot of energy and a lot of time investing in jobs for the future and creating an environment where well-paid jobs will be available to our young people. And we have a whole group of people now who are failing. So I'd like to know, I totally support this plan because I'm sure, as Carol will tell you, I'm a great champion of integration. But I still have these concerns, like Councillor James, about these young people who are. I don't think we can reverse this in a short term. This is a long-term plan to solve the problems. So we have a whole cohort of young people that have been let down, not by you, and I'm sure not by teachers. I think it's a set of circumstances that people find themselves in. But I think it's important that if we're talking about an integrated service, we take control of that situation. So I guess Scrutiny's got a part to play, that we know how that particular group of people are going to improve. And more importantly, how it fits into the bigger picture of the council of creating future workplaces for people. So I think I'd like a little bit more information on this, because it does make really bad reading, that many people being failed by our school system.
Who wants to take it? Yeah.
So I think the benefit of hearing what you've all said this afternoon is that what you're saying is exactly the same as we'd be saying.
Yes.
So none of us think it's acceptable.
No, we don't.
That we've got children who are not reaching the standard. And that will include my colleagues who are sat behind me, who are out working in the schools all the time. So we agree with you. And that's why we want to, that is why Judith and her team have worked on something that is different. But I'd just like to put that in a bit of context in terms of some of the things that we're going to have to look at. Because you know from other things that we've brought to you where we need to make change, what you've got to have in place right the way across the whole system is the leadership, the governance you've talked about. It's around the standards of education, the teaching, it's the standards of improvements that are expected. It's around making sure you've got the funding in place. It's very complex. It's not a single answer. You know that, and so do we. So what we're going to need to do is to be able to have the dialogue with you through Scrutiny about making sure we've got all of those things in place. Judith and her team can give you lots and lots of details about the various interventions that will be put in place. Judith mentioned the Education Board, and if David was sat at the table, he'd be talking about the work they're going in and doing on a day-to-day basis, improving standards in various schools. But what my plea to everybody is, this is for all of us. This isn't just about what is the education service going to do. It's not going to be just about what the partnership does. It's going to be the role of elected members. It's the role of that much wider group. It's about employers. This is whole system. It's about our children and young people and what we expect for the future. And so I'm really pleased that I know you share the same views. I know that's what you want. So I know we're not knocking at a door saying, can you have a look at this and scrutinise it? We all want to get to the same place. And the team won't have all the answers. Other people are going to have it. If you're sat on governing bodies, you're going to have a role to play. So I think it's about how we put this in the context of that much wider work we're doing as well. The work we're doing around, and you've heard Judith come before, around the integration for SEND, the work we're doing around early help, around vulnerable young people. This is sat within that. And I know that's very high level, and I can see lots of nods about some of the things, and I know Judith will want to say some of the things perhaps in a bit more detail, but that's what I think we've all got to hold on to. And I think for this subject, all of you will want to get behind that and say that's the sort of thing we want to see. This may be the vehicle, but it's a much wider project than us just coming in saying we're setting up a partnership. And Judith will probably go, right, now I'll get inside a bit more of the detail. Now Carol's done the
No, I'm not sure. You know, whether you would at this stage want some of that detail. I think what Carol's outlined there is that system that we talk about is not just about a group of schools sitting in isolation, even if they have worked to a large degree on English and maths and curriculum subjects, you know, in isolation. Then the young people who attend schools don't just attend schools, and they have, you know, families and parents and friends who are all influenced. So we've done a lot of work over the last year on how we would reach out to parents, how we would talk to parents, how we would give impartial advice and guidance to parents who are the key influencers for decisions that young people make, you know, the choices. And, you know, you've heard me say many times since coming to this city that people say to me, oh, it's largely about aspiration. Young people don't have high aspirations. Employers don't have high expectations. Parents don't have high aspirations. We need to describe those as a full partnership. And that does mean that employers, the college, higher education, governors in schools, everybody has to come together and understand what high aspiration would actually look like. Because then we can start talking to young people who have got good results a lot of the time at Key Stage 2. We can start saying to them at 11, what's your pathway going to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to try? You know, the college is putting on loads of taster courses in science, technology, engineering, maths, all of these things. So it's about us all understanding how we help young people to reach for the sky, because at the moment, not understanding what those job opportunities might be in the future means they don't understand the relevance of English and maths a lot of the time. And so I think it's about time that whilst some of it may seem very, very complex, some of it is beautifully simple. How do we incentivise the very best teachers to come to this city? How do we make sure that governors have all got the right expectations and that governors are talking across a network and not just in their schools? I am talking at the Governors' Conference in a couple of weeks' time, and I can guarantee you that there'll probably be 70 people there when we have governors across the city of over 1,000. So how do we reach everybody? It's probably only through our networks that we can extend that. And, you know, and my dialogue with employers, because of course I also lead on skills, is when you're setting up those jobs, think about what you'd be prepared to do to bring young people to the table and train them. What's your investment? And my challenge most recently to employers has also been, if you don't think that young people have the qualifications or their aptitude to take those jobs, then how do we get you into schools to inspire young people and bring the real world to them? Because there's quite a lot of talk in the city, but not necessarily the right actions.
Can I just have a quick?
Councillor James, yeah.
Judith, thank you for that. I appreciate everything you said, and I agree with everything you said, quite honestly. But we are a scrutiny panel. We have to challenge and challenge all the things you're saying. And that's why I think we need this delivery plan for the partnership to come back to scrutiny, so we can have a really good look at this, because that's what we do.
The other thing, just to come back to what you were saying about governors, of course, with the change of the legislation about who could be governors, there are far less councillors on governing bodies these days, because you can only have one on as a local authority representative, and I don't believe they can. You can have a councillor who isn't a local authority person. Jane might be able to contradict me on that. I am correct. Good. Makes a change. So, you know, so there's a lot of councillors these days that don't sit on there, whereas that was that learning thing that we all did as new councillors. We all ended up on local schools, and I think that's one of my criticisms, should we say, of the legislation that has reduced some of us being on governing bodies.
Perhaps that's one of those rules that's there to be broken. I mean, I do wonder if we're going to bring this partnership together and we're going to feel that we can see the impact of our influence as Champion for Children, then perhaps part of the conversation with Matt and with Matt's CEOs is we want some local voice, not necessarily on the governing body, but, you know, in an advisory sense, because we can't allow these rules to actually then prevent us moving forward on something that needs to happen.
Quite agree, and that's why I became a member of the MAT in my local area. So, yeah. Okay, I've now got Councillor Dan, then Councillor MacDonald.
Well, Judith has sort of answered my question, because mine was about sort of buy-in. How do we sell this to the wider educational picture? Judith and I have had a conversation about governors, because I am a school governor and there are other school governors in the room, but we get very, very little information coming through, and governors are responsible for the attainment of the children across the city. So although the school, you know, the teachers have to go into the classroom and do the teaching and learning bit, it's still the governors who should be holding their teachers and their schools to account. So I think my plea is, and I'd written down here 3 things. It was, how do we access the leaders in the city, so all the way through? So when this gets to a business case that has more scope and more picture about it, so it's more tangible for you to sell, it's to, I don't know whether we have non-pupil teaching days, don't we? Whether we somehow request, whether we have a session where all head teachers and their senior leadership teams can come for a day to actually understand it, and at the same day the heads, the governors and the heads of finance and things, because that is what's going to be the cultural shift in Plymouth, is if everybody buys into it. And I know that the Plymouth Education Board has representatives, but you know, it's like a funnel, isn't it? You put all this information in at the top at this level, and it gets down to this meeting and this meeting and this meeting, and by the time you get down to a small school, the information that you've received has been filtered 6 or 7 times, and therefore you don't get that scope of intervention that this is trying to do. And I'm going to reiterate it again, and if we can get it as part of a wider school commissioners project, then I think it adds even more, I don't want to use the word sort of importance, but if we can get it as a funded evaluated project, then it makes it even more important for us to get it right and get people's buy-in, because it's not just the few people who sit on the Plymouth Education Board, it is the wider one. So that was it really, but you sort of said that as well.
Can I seek some clarification before we go on? Councillor James, you asked for the delivery plan for the partnership to come back. The partnership, yeah, because it's anticipated that we've got stages of work to be done now to build this partnership, and it may not be ready to launch as a new entity or a vehicle till April 19. I wondered if part of what you're talking about with this focus on standards is actually the education board rather than the partnership, because the forward plan and the detail around the education board can come back much sooner.
Yeah, I think that's where we'd like to see that. I think it's just a general review of how we're going to improve the attainment, and so sort of anything like that needs to come. If we can have that back, and we'll discuss with you when is an appropriate time. If it can be within this civic year, that would be wonderful. Yeah, for the board. Yes, that would be great. Yeah. So we'll programme that in at a suitable time with you. That's great. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I have a quick question, Chair, which may sound a little off the walls. However, the government, Theresa May's avowed manifesto commitment was to increase the number of grammar schools. We have two girls' grammar schools and one boys' grammar school. That is still, as far as I'm aware, a political commitment. So I do wonder, I'm not sure if it's a risk or a benefit is what I'm trying to say here. So put it where you will on your register. But that could upset that could do something to the equilibrium, and we can't ignore what wings its way down from central government to local government. And just finally a comment. I think I'd like to see this entity not just be transactional in terms of you're offering goods and services to schools, which they buy in and it helps balance the budget. I think its success will be measured, and I do support it, if you can move what is transactional to truly transformational.
Okay, mundane question. Legal advice to set up this partnership. Will you be in a position to share that with us, or, you know?
So, as I say, we assuming that we go forward with the development of the partnership, there will be a period of activity of working with schools to construct exactly what the model looks like, because I think, as Councillor MacDonald's just said very eloquently, this isn't about just establishing a trading company. It's about establishing a partnership which will be the integrated delivery of our functions. So, as Carol said earlier, you know, going back to the path we've trodden that you recognise now about integrated commissioning and integrated delivery, then this partnership has to represent integrated delivery. There won't be things we keep back in the council. Everything will be going to the partnership. Therefore, there's a period of at least 6 months where we have to look at financial, technical and legal advice to say, does it look something like Catered? Does it look more like a shared service of some other form? What is the right vehicle going to be? And it will only be at the point that schools reach consensus with us around the risk share and the form of that vehicle, the model, that we can actually bring anything back. But I think we do have in Catered a pretty good model that schools will recognise and have got confidence in after 2.5 years. But certainly, yes, we can bring those options back. I just don't think those options will be fully worked up for another 8 or 9 months.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Judith. We talk about going into partnership, but what happens if we don't go into partnership? What would Plan B be? Or Plan B C?
So Plan B, on all our best efforts at modelling, and without further major statutory changes, legislative changes, Plan B would be that we have to have a look at the way that we discharge our statutory functions. We don't see, I mean, the department has been reducing. We've had an external verification of, you know, things being run well in the department. So it would really be looking at where we can collapse different functions to maybe broader spans of control for managers, things like that. So it would be, because we can't reduce our statutory function any further. I can't only do half of school admissions or half of transport. It'll be very much about, you know, what else could we be integrated or share in a different way with another partner. But Plan B, we know would be feasible, but it wouldn't be optimal. And it would leave schools at risk because we meet a lot of unplanned need in schools at the moment. And in coming together in the partnership, we also remove the risk of a number of other partners. If you take the work that goes on in inclusion and, you know, that offer to schools for parental support and therapy services and things like that, as a lot of our other partners are also reliant on this partnership to become more resilient because they're financially challenged too.
I suppose what we have to drag into this is what effect could this possibly have where the Torbay services scheme is going? You know, will that have any effect on this at all? And secondly, Are we obliged to talk to Ofsted about this proposal in regards of when they were going, they're due to come and inspect again, aren't they, soon, the whole services? I just wondered whether there was any thoughts or impact on them.
So if I cover initially the Torbay piece of work, as you all know, following the council meeting, we now enter the period of due diligence. We've not got into the level of detail around what it is we might do across services in the future. So at this stage, we would not be able to say that it's got any impact. We need to do the due diligence, and David is heading that up for us and beginning to scope out what that due diligence looks like for us to come back in January to council and you to make the decision at that point if you wish to proceed. I think at that point, we then, if you do proceed, we start to look at where do we go. However, you've got to remember that the initial bit with Torbay is around the issues around social care. That is where they have been judged inadequate, and that's obviously the thing that has started this journey on. So that would be the position on Torbay. Do you want to cover the other bit, Judith?
Yeah, we're not obliged to talk to Ofsted about the way that we are organised and the way we discharge our functions. I think it's wise that we do, and we do have regular meetings with them where we will share the way that we're trying to support the system and the system changes. But it wouldn't be Ofsted's role on this particular situation anyway to pass a view of whether it was good or bad. They are keen to see systems of school improvement more, operating more effectively. And I think that if we get the work of the board up and running well, I think they'll actually be really interested in looking with us at how well that works to make a difference. Because, they are as aware as everybody else that there are some places where a dual system, maintained schools and academisation, has led at times to fragmentation and some loss of oversight. So I think they'd be interested.
David, we are empathising with you and, sort of understand that all this pressure may get a bit too much at times for you. So you can come here and shout. We'll be quite happy to have that release of energy there, all right? Anybody else with any questions or queries? I suppose one of my thoughts are with free schools, I know we have that overarching thing to make sure that their standards are good. How is the dialogue between PCC education and free schools? Are we sort of on a good relationship?
Well, I think it's fair to say that, whatever part of the academy system you're talking about, whether it's studio schools, free schools, academies per se, I think one of the things we have enjoyed and will continue to enjoy is an incredibly productive conversation with all schools. So David has a team called Plymouth Leadership Advisors, and they have regular meetings with all schools. They don't just go into maintained. And we also, if you recall from previous conversations, we have this integrated or blended approach with the local Teaching School Alliance, where we will develop improvement plans, quality assure improvement plans. We'll support the teaching school with pieces of work that need to be coordinated. So we've already got a really strong platform in the city for launching to further integration. And I personally, I do not go to the door of a school and they say, go away, Judith, because I'm an academy. I think the challenge for us has not been about people pulling up their drawbridge. It's just been lack of capacity in the system to get hold of the deeper entrenched challenges that schools face. And there just not been the support there, and in some cases the funding there to bring in the support that's been needed. So, bringing that greater oversight does extend our reach and resource.
Could I just add to that? I mean, we're really clear. Judith and her team obviously are in the schools on a very regular basis, but we see this as all our responsibilities. So we have a programme of visits. It makes no difference what type of school they are, and that is for Councillor Beer, Tracy as Chief Exec, and myself as DCS. as well as all the work that Judith and the rest of her team, we just go on a regular basis to schools to go in and visit, and we make no differentiation between what type of school it is. And I can say, just as Judith has, we all get invited in and welcome into the school, and makes no difference what type of school it is.
Councillor Dan.
Carol's just answered, really. I was just about to say, do you go in to visit all the schools, whether they're a single academy trust or a multi-academy trust? Because, you know, although they're all in different governance structures, the outcome should still be the same.
Right, last opportunity, folks. Any more questions? No? Can I thank all of you for coming along? It's been gratefully appreciated. Do we want to ask them to leave and then do the recommendations? Or
Recommendations?
all right, we've got some recommendations that Sian has been frantically typing.
Thank you, Chair. So from the discussion of the committee, the recommendations you seem to be making are in relation to, for the committee to scrutinise the full business case for the partnership, to include a full assessment of interdependencies with other work and due consideration of legal advice, exploring within that the potential for it to become a broader funded and evaluated project with regional and national agencies. Recommendation 2, as part of that business case, to include a full assessment of risk.
Yes.
Recommendation 3, a further scrutiny session to be held in the context of the planned partnership to review the steps being taken to improve attainment levels of pupils, particularly for key stages 3 and 4, engaging with the Plymouth Education Board to happen within the civic year.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Chair.
Does anybody else want to add something? Yep. Sue, do you want to use your...
I did mention about the context of well-being, and I did mention youth services as a whole picture, and I don't think I would like to see. I can understand the priorities and the focus, but I would like mention of some of these organisations that impact on the whole child in the context of education.
Yep, Sian's just frantically typing, and we'll get something put together there.
Yeah, I think I've got something if I could read it.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Chair, Councillor MacDonald. I've added in recommendation 1 for the committee to scrutinise the full business case for the partnership to include an assessment of interdependencies with other work, including wellbeing services for children, and due consideration of legal advice. Will that cover it? Would you like me to be more explicit?
Wellbeing and youth service. Do you want to add youth service as a named service?
Youth services,
Yeah.
but I don't want a
Yeah.
list, because you might want
No.
to add children's services,
Yeah.
which you may well want to do, but all those organisations that we recognise contribute to the well-being of the child. Because you,
Partners.
So any appropriate
whatever the
service?
phrasing is, I
Yeah.
don't want a list.
No, that's all
Youth
right.
partners.
Appropriate service, I think. Yeah.
That's fine.
Do you want to-
Thank you.
We'll get the word. Yes, I think if we look at the, it's the whole, as you say, it's the whole case around a child. Yeah. Okay, can I thank everybody? Thank you very much for coming along, including the little gaggle at the back, who was sitting very quietly and very well behaved for sitting at the back of the classroom. Makes a change. Thank you very much indeed. Now we'll let you do a quick shufty around of officers. Well, I'm impressed. We're ahead of time. So I'm going to blame Ross. Ross must be the one that keeps us. Yeah.
That is minuted, isn't it?
Right. Well, can I welcome Councillor Boyer, Carol again, David for yet another session, and Craig. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to be looking at the CQC local systems review, but before we do that, I know that, well, at least two of you, I don't know about Craig as well, three of you, have been at the local government conference, hence us changing our date twice to get to today. So I think you owe us a review of what you experienced and learnt and contributed at the conference. So I don't know who wants to start.
Only the good news.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think it's fair to say conference this year, although it was still enjoyable, was a completely different experience from the year before. I feel it was quite heavily charged with, like, beating local government. And I know we were there from local government, but Terry and I, at the end of the first day, felt as we both looked at each other and felt we'd been battered. Speaking to our colleagues from other authorities, whatever their political persuasion, all were coming up with the same thing. They sort of like felt that almost we were the scapegoat for, in particular, detox. And I think it's fair to say that really detox was everything on every agenda. Detox was part of it. So, but having said that, I think...
Can we explain what detox is for people looking in?
Delayed transfer of care. And and obviously the CQC reviews that are taking place. But having said that, there was a lot that we could learn there. The local government, if nobody's actually looked at it or nerdish enough to do it, adult social care, it's really good read, well worth looking at. And again, the delayed transfers of care features quite highly in there. So, well, I don't know if anybody else wants to say any more.
So we always find it really helpful to go to national conference. It is adults and children's conference, and you do need to take both your cabinet members and more than one officer with you, because other than the plenary sessions where you obviously get a panel on a particular topic, there are then 6 seminars run all the way through the day at the same time, and they cover everything across the children and adults sort of arena. And so it's a really good opportunity to dip in and pick up best practice that other people are doing, because everybody's innovating in different ways. So we all went to different things. We all dipped into some children's and some adults. There was stuff on funding. There were things that people were doing that were different to the approach we were taking on some things. There were many things we went into where when we came out, we said, actually, we've gone further ahead already, which is inevitable. A lot of the benefits of going to conference are the side discussions that you have, because you meet up with people from other authorities who want to share experiences. I would agree with what Councillor Bowyer has said. There was from the adult world, there was a heavy push around funding, and the whole of the health and care system, but in particular for local government on delayed transfers of care, but it was about the whole of the pressure and the link to funding. And for children, what is also coming very apparent now is the funding in children and the cost of placements and the impact of that and the type of placements. And again, I know you've looked at that. One of the sessions that I went to was around the mental health and five-year forward view. There was some interesting information that came out of that. So it does depend on what you dip into. There was one on the whole of the education changes. And so what Judith's just been talking to you about was played out by other authorities who were grappling with the same issue. We actually came back really, I think we felt quite invigorated by it, but at the same time it was really demanding this time because there were a lot of meetings, and on some days we were in the conference from 8 a.m. right the way through to 7 p.m. and there was hardly any break in between. So I don't know if Craig wants to add any.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, Carol or Linda, are you going to introduce the paper, or is Craig? Is that who's going to introduce?
All right. As with anything, as you all know, we were given additional funding that went into our Better Care Fund earlier this year, a 3-year one-off payment. And as with any sort of like extras that you get, there's always sort of like a caveat. We need to know what you're spending it on, and we need to make sure it's actually working. We all expected that. And part of that, the Secretary of State said that he would be asking the CQC to do targeted reviews to make sure the money was having the desired effect. Something that we all know, but was heavily sort of came through at conference, was that we really don't want another winter where we have a shortage of beds. And obviously the delayed transfer of care will have an impact on that. There will be other factors, but that obviously is going to make a difference. Now, there are 20 health care systems that are being reviewed, and we're part of the first 12. And our review is taking place the first week in December. What they're going to be having a look at is the whole system. So from when somebody enters the front door of Derriford right through to the exit, and then what's happening once wherever they've gone to their normal place, their normal home, and be having a look at the complete system. So I think the pressure points are ones that we've always recognised. We obviously want to keep people out of Derriford if we can. So we need to sort of like put some of our money, more money into prevention. We already have some, but we need a lot more to actually keep people well outside of hospital. There's lots of different systems. It's not just the local authority system. Obviously, the NHS has a part to play. We have to look at like our reablement team and with Live Well, and even down to our primary care. So it feels as if local government is being judged, but actually there's a lot of other partners in the system as well that are all playing a part. We need to sort of like make sure that when people are discharged from hospital, that wherever they go to, obviously they're safe, and really the last thing they want, or the system wants, is for them to have to be readmitted back into hospital again.
I mean, get into a bit of the detail.
Yeah. Do you want to carry it? Oh, go on.
So I think that's I think that's a really good opening into the CQC process, really. As Councillor Bowyer mentions, we are one of the first 12, really, and you have the full schedule of other local authorities local systems, I should say, who's already been reviewed, and we can touch on some of the learning from those at the end of it as well, just to pick up some common themes as well. So I will build that into this presentation. I think it's really important because the reviews were on the back, if you like, of delayed transfers of care or bed blocking, to use the emotive language. But when you get into the detail, it is very much that whole systems review. And they do talk a lot about those pressure points and maintaining the well-being of a person, crisis management, how we respond as a system, and then step down as well. And that's discharges from hospital, but also onward from things like intermediate care as well. So it is a full end-to-end system review based on the usual CQC methodology, which is safe, effective leadership, and all those domains which they would normally cover during the review. We are now into the process itself. Well, we actually formally start the process on Monday, the 27th. Carol will receive a call or a letter, and I think it's a mixture of both by the noises coming from CQC. But we're already at that early stage, and within your slide deck you will see something called a local system review process, and that talks about what the process that they're going through at the moment, and they're on that information gathering stage at the moment. And we know that because Carol's already had a talk with the lead inspector, and they've picked up some themes already from doing the data, from looking at websites, etc., as the case may be. And clearly, on the back of that as well, they will be doing building up their own performance scorecard on us as well. And we've had a look at other areas which has been through it to give us that balance. Within your pack, you will see that initial performance summary as well. Now, why that's in the pack, Chair, is that was the initial Department of Health summary of performance that tripped us into the CQC review. So they looked at 6 different key performance indicators, and you can see in there Plymouth has some green, and then particularly one is glowing red and one's amber. And what they did, there's weightings behind these as well, and delayed transfers of care had the most significance worth of weighting. Also, which we are low on undoubtedly, is proportion of discharges following emergency admissions which occur at the weekend. Another system problem as well. My colleagues at PHNT will absolutely testify to that as well, that we have a problem in making sure that we have 7-day working and 7-day discharges as well. So it was those 2 indicators in particular that tripped us into being one of those 12s as well. On there, you will see we benchmark well on some other areas, such as emergency admissions, according to this data at that particular snapshot, and then length of stay. So a number of things which we benchmark quite well on, but it was absolutely those 2 which tripped us in. So they will be harvesting that data at the moment. They'll be looking at it as well, and that's what stage they're in at the moment. So they're at the information gathering stage. As I said, on Monday, Carol will, the gun is fired, if you like, and we will receive that letter and the conversation with the lead inspector. And we will then be absolutely expected within that period of time to complete something called a local system overview information request, which is a very grand title for a self-assessment in my eyes. And it's chunked up into those 5 elements, really. And then we do move into what I would call what is a very traditional CQC review, or an Ofsted style, where they do site visits, including focus group and interviews. Something called a relational audit tool, which is where they get feedback from stakeholders, the whole system. This is a whole system, so it will involve care homes, it will involve GP practices, it will involve overview and scrutiny, etc., as the case may be, and they will get feedback on how the systems are working. They will, in terms of site visit, I'll also, in Holton, who's been the first area to be reviewed, their report was published during conference week itself, and we've got some good learning from that, certainly. And I must say that the spirit of collaboration from all the local authorities involved and local areas involved as well has been absolutely first class, and they've been happy to share all the data, all the processes they're going through, and it feels a really close network on that. And that site visit, what they did was they visited 9 sites in Holton, including A&E and all those things, mystery shops as well. They have a particular focus at weekends as well, so Kevin and the crew will be on their absolute best behaviour at weekends and all those things, and out of hours. But they absolutely know our system has issues around weekends, so you would expect them to absolutely see how those discharges are happening at weekends and that flow through the system. But they'll also be having focus group, as I said, and we'll come on to the timetable in a little bit more detail, because there will also be a role for scrutiny within that process. They also do case tracking, which is looking at cases. In Holton, they did a total of 26 cases, and they do a mixture. And I think what I would say of the information we've seen today is CQC's methodology, I think, is thorough, and I think it's fair, and I think it's balanced. And they've absolutely got the case tracking to say, tell us what's worked well in preventing someone from going into hospital, tell us what hasn't worked well as well, so that they get a real good balance of how the system's working. Use of I statements is to make sure that all their methodology is centred around persons as well, and information flow tools. How well does information flow around our system? We know information is a key enabler of any health and social care system, really. So who will be involved in the review? Lots of different bodies: Plymouth City Council, Plymouth Hospitals Trust, as you would expect, Live Well, service users and carers, independent providers. So it is very much that whole system approach. In terms of the timeline there, you will see week commencing the 27th of October, as I said, which is next week. These things come around really quickly. We get the letter, and as I said, there is a conversation, I think, with the inspector on Monday. Is it? Tuesday we have a conversation with the lead inspector. And then the 14th and 15th is the key. They come down for a 2-day initial site visit. And I think they're hoping to interview chair within that process as well, some senior leaders, some service users, domiciliary care providers, residential providers, but also to visit some of our services as well. And you want, certainly within these reviews, to absolutely focus on some of the really good practice that we've got in there as well. So they will be visiting some of our voluntary community sectors, hopefully some of our extra care schemes, and etc. So some of the really positives that we've worked hard within the city to achieve and over the last 2 to 3 years, really. And then we have to, within this period as well, do our self-assessment as well, which we are working through at the moment. And that goes into a prep period as well. I should also say within that week as well, they also meet with other CQC inspectors to get a flavour of how we're doing in terms of care homes and nursing care homes, and how our quality is to other areas as well. So those inspectors of those care homes will also be reviewed as well, give their perspectives as well. So it is really comprehensive. And then we get on to the review itself, which is week commencing the 4th of December. And days should include out of hours as well. And there will be a number of structured interviews during that period. We will work with them during the time frame. I would have thought there will probably be a role for overview and scrutiny during that process. And so we will need to work that into there as well. And then we get our feedback, etc. After the review, and this is really coming out strongly, is there'll be something called a local summit where they present their findings. As a local system leaders, we will then deliberate those findings and come up with an action plan. What they're absolutely saying, and the learning from Holton in particular, was the Health and Wellbeing Board need to own that action plan and make sure that the change is happening as well. So the Health and Wellbeing Board feels really pivotal in this process as well. And that's something they've picked up on Holton on as well as they're going through the process. And that, as you see, is on the 5th of February as well. Touch on the initial performance summary. So potential lines of inquiry. So as I said, we're in the process now where we're checking the data. We're working as a system. We've got quite a lot of input into the self-assessment already from many partners across it. I think the lines of inquiry are probably not surprising to Scrutiny. Meeting demand and demographic pressures. We know we see all throughout the system that there's complexity of need, there's an ageing population. How well are our services preventing that, people escalating? System flow, this is a real big issue for us, and we've been discussing this for quite some while. How well does our system flow in terms of that? How well do we absolutely get people out of hospital? How well do we get people out of discharge? Are our plans robust? What's our delayed transfers of care trajectories looking like? What changes have you already put in place? Are they having an impact? And that links to the findings from our peer reviews. We've had a number of peer reviews because we are a challenged health and care economy, which have looked at this, and they've certainly highlighted a number of areas for improvement, and we've taken some actions to try and address those. They've absolutely highlighted some system interface issues between Live Well and the Trust, some issues around flows from intermediate care, and the appointment of a director of urgent care services across the Trust and Live Well is starting to have a real input around that. Rob Sainsbury, as well, from New Devon CCG, who's the Chief Operating Officer, has also recently established a System Improvement Board, which is meeting on a fortnightly basis and absolutely drilling through performance data and performance improvement on a fortnightly basis, day by day by day, looking at that. And that robust methodology is really starting to show where we need to target. Primary care fragility, I think, is an issue. It's a well-known issue from Scrutiny as well, and that absolutely has an impact on flow throughout the system as well, and it will impact directly on the hospital, and that will absolutely be a key line of inquiry. And myself and Kevin was here last time. We talked quite a lot about workforce challenges. I think that's a real big issue as well. What are our plans around workforce? And that's that whole career around caring, isn't it? It's not just one part of it as well. What are our plans to address some of those workforce issues, work differently as well within the available resource we've got? So, as I said, we're absolutely into the process now, and we've had a number of conversations with those local authorities. As I said, they found the reviews quite balanced as well, which is encouraging. They have stressed to us the whole system nature of these reviews. This is not a local authority review, it's a whole system review. They are very challenging, the reviews, in terms of looking at those points. They are really interested in the impact that our system has on patients, and that's exactly the right focus, really. What is the outcomes for the people who use our services as well? And we are getting some learning, as I said, around that process, around the leadership of the Health and Wellbeing Board as well. So we are on that journey around that, and we will continue to prepare for CQC coming. I think that's all I wanted to say. Carol?
As you can see from Craig, very, very detailed review on its way. You asked if we'd made any interventions at conference. Well, certainly when the leader of CQC did her presentation, I did manage to pose a question and said that we were looking forward to CQC joining us in Plymouth for our review, and that you know, we would take the opportunity to showcase the things that we've done well, but also to highlight the areas of difficulty. And I think, you know, your panels had a very important part in that. You've seen all the partners over a variety of meetings looking at different points there. I think we're very self-aware as a system. We know where the issues are. We know where things are changing. Craig's mentioned about things like delayed transfers of care. They'll also look at length of stay. They'll look at issues, as Craig said, around primary care, and you've certainly looked at that recently, and they will want to know if we've got plans in place to deal with all the issues. So, are we self-aware? Do we know what the issues are? What are we doing about them?
Thank you for that. One of the things that we've had on our work plan for a few months is looking at primary care, and I think now that we're in a position now to be looking at doing something about that now, because they've got a primary care plan together, haven't they, from the CCG and the NHS England. So I think it's probably an optimum time, and if we can start that in November, I think that would be useful as another tool to go to this review, quite honestly. So we'll see what we can organise for that. Right, I have a little list. Councillor Mahoney, you're first.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like some clarification on the third criteria, total delayed days per 100,000 18 plus population, because I see delayed discharges as splitting into two categories, really. Those who are ready to go home, but arrangements have to be made, or to go into a care home, and I suspect that's what we're talking about here, but I also pick up, even though I'm retired, that I think patients are often ready to go home a long time before they are deemed by PHT to be fit to go home. And I think this is possibly due to the fact that junior doctors don't work in firms, and the responsibility for getting patients sorted and out sometimes falls between several stools. So I think there are two issues here. The hospital is full of patients, partly because some are ready to go and aren't deemed ready to go, and then there may be others who are deemed ready to go, about whom arranging their discharge is a problem. What are we talking about here? If it's only one of those aspects, what's happening about the other one? Thanks.
So, in terms of the actual metrics, so there's two different aspects to this, really. The actual, sorry, just get my total delayed days, that's per 1,000 18 plus population. That is a measure that's tripped us into being a CQC area. The CQC review itself, though, Councillor Mahoney will just focus on over 65 cohort. So that's an important clarification, and apologies for not making that clear at the start of the presentation, but that's important. So that's where they'll focus as well. They will look through the whole system, so they won't just go into metrics. The metrics are the metrics, and they're nationally defined by government, and we have a well-established process in there. The Trust, I would say, they'll look at the Trust's internal processes. The Trust has made some significant processes internally by implementing the Safer Bundle and absolutely speeding up the process as well. The Trust would probably agree that, yes, further improvements are always necessary, but they've made some significant process changes as well, which those wards are now starting to flow far better. In the honest answer to your question is they will be looking at discharges, though, wherever they occur. Sorry, delays wherever they occur within the system, not just in the hospital, etc. So we think that our intermediate care services, there's delays within that, and the length of stay within those is longer than we would expect as well. So they'll be focusing on those as well. So the metrics are nationally defined. There's lots of debate of whether delayed transfers of care is the best indicator, or is it actually length of stay within the hospital, which the Trust has done some fabulous work to get that particular metric downwards. Or is it that you look at patients' safety and harm and those delays wherever they are in the system and look at it in that way of a more person-centred way. So the data's the data, but their methodology and their approach would mean they look at individual cases, and I think that will be along the whole care pathway, not just one element.
We're not good on this data set because it's delayed once they're deemed fit to go home or to a care home or whatever. So it's that stage that's given us this poor rating, not what the hospital are doing internally.
This is absolutely about delays when they've signed off by multi-agency teams through the criteria. This is what that's about. We have got, I will make no bones about it, we've got too many people who are in the hospital who shouldn't be there. And we are working through plans to do that. I would be the first to acknowledge that. We've also got people in intermediate care who should be moved on as well. And working through those plans systematically is what we need to do. And the criteria is the criteria, I think, and we're working the best we can towards that.
Yeah, could I just add one thing? In terms of the work Craig's describing there around, the counting's the counting. There, around delayed transfers of care, they will look at ones that are attributed to health, ones that are attributed to social care, and ones that are attributed to both. And they will look at things like, is the person waiting for an assessment? Are they waiting for a placement? And what is the criteria? And that gets broken down as well. So in terms of this number Craig's talking about, we will be able to say on any given day, this is the block, this is why they're delayed, how many there are in each category. And it's that gets reported nationally. And that is the absolute figure. What we will be able to demonstrate is what we're doing and whether that is coming down, because clearly that's what we want to be able to do. We have some evidence that looks like from the time they first looked at it, we have some evidence to show it is beginning to come down. We need to sustain that improvement and be able to demonstrate that. So that will be a big focus for us. Craig is also right that they will be looking not only at that block that we're reporting on, they will be looking at the whole system flow and how long people are in there, and whether it's in PHNT or in Liverpool South West or in a residential or nursing home, they're going to be looking at everybody. They're going to follow people through that system.
Thank you, Carol. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. In Councillor Mrs Bower's opening speech, you mentioned about detox. I'm not sure whether it was a grim or a grimace, but it's no secret we've been experiencing problems with detox. It's been a problem with this scrutiny panel for some time now. I suppose my question is, why is this still a problem, despite the interventions you've attempted to put in the system?
I think we've all got to recognise that we have actually got more and more people coming through our doors than we've ever had before, especially in the hospital. And we are actually moving more people through in the system than we've ever done before. But as soon as we're moving this end, there's more keep coming on. So it is just really, the demographics is not all the problem, but a lot of the problem.
Quick question, quick answer. Thank you.
Another thing also, I think we used to just discharge on 5 days a week, but we are now actually trying very hard to discharge 7 days a week. Now, that's not just, you know, it's not just simply get people out. Obviously, you've got to get everything else in place. Like if someone can go home, but they need a certain piece of equipment, then we've got to make sure that we can get all that in place as well so people can safely go home. And we are starting to work through that now.
Quick one, if I may. This is driven by CQC, if I understand it. It has been? Yeah, okay. So what can we expect as a direct result from CQC review?
So I can answer that question in a way. Can I just get back to the reasons behind delayed transfers of care? It's incredibly complex, and we have put in a number of interventions, and your questions and challenge is a good one. I think we're always learning as well, and I think our home first philosophy hasn't been strong enough as absolutely. And we've delayed too often, I think assessed too long. And so if you look at our profile of delays, they're unusual compared to some other systems where often it's the packages of care which are holding people up. We have some packages of care, but the majority of our assessment delays as well. So we haven't embedded that home first philosophy. With that new post in place, we're starting to see that real culture change starting to happen as well. These things take time. And as Councillor Bowie also points out as well, the demand at Derriford has absolutely gone up year on year, month on month, week on week. Kevin will probably say day on day as well in terms of that demand as well. And that is both attendances but also admissions. It's an incredibly challenged system without a shadow of doubt. So that's the reasons behind that. In terms of CQC, what can we expect? So the CQC will give us a report. It will make a series of recommendations. Hopefully we know some of the areas because we're self-awareness and we've got a good set of plans in place. They may come up with others. They won't be coming back is what they've said, but they will expect the Health and Wellbeing Board to see through those changes. There is another dimension to this, and it is around we received a letter which is fairly well known as well, which basically says that the Secretary of State, if our performance doesn't improve in this area, could direct some of the Improve Better Care Fund going forwards as well. So that could be a direct intervention as well. As I said, we think we've got some robust and credible plans which is starting to show some improvement.
I think one of the recommendations needs to be that we have whatever your action plan or whatever you're going to phrase it as being that comes out of this report. We'd like it to come back here so that we can monitor that it's being, I say, implemented, and sort of if there's any help that we can give you, obviously, you know.
Thank you, Chair. I think that would be most welcome.
Councillor Tuffin.
Thank you, Chair. I must say, Craig, you covered it so well. I'm struggling with the question, but I'll think of one. I feel sure. I suppose the question would be that I know how hard you all work to get the delayed transfers operational and working real. But I suppose my question is, we always kind of thought that staff integration would solve this. So I suppose if I can make a couple of points. One question would be, is that working as well as we'd all hoped and would wish for? And I have to ask the question about the money because I'm fully aware it's going to be a shrinking pot of money over the next 3 years, which the following report tells us. So I suppose the question is, are we investing in areas that we're going to have to fund next year to keep this good work up? Because I have some concerns about that if it's a shrinking pot of money, which, you know, regardless of whether the government decide to punish us by taking some of it away earlier rather than later, it's going to disappear over 3 years anyway. So I think it's important we understand where that money's being invested, not to a detail, but to a degree that it's not going to have an ongoing cost to the integrated fund. And I assume that the CQC will consider our difficulties with GPs and the fact that that's bound to have an impact on our hospital admissions and our delayed transfers of care. So if I may just ask those questions, I think the funding is really important element of it.
So just
Thank you, Chair.
just to sum up, I think it's one, is integration working? I think that's one of the questions. Then it's absolutely around sustainability of our investment as well. Those are two absolutely key questions. I think you're right. In terms of, let's start with the integration question. I think integrations work well in many areas without a shadow of doubt, but it's caused some other interface issues. And I highlighted earlier that we've had a number of peer reviews which says there's interface issues between Live Well and the trust in terms of that, how we set that integration up. And you can integrate in a variety of ways. I think immediately we've responded to that is by, as I said, setting up this post who's able to direct both sets of teams, so you start working as one virtually. We've made some adjustments as well in terms of the trust now taking a greater role in the minor injuries units. That feels absolutely the right thing to do for me in terms of starting to integrate that urgent care system. And that starts short-term responses to, if you like, tweaking or changing the system to get it to work better. The longer-term plans, we talked last time here around accountable care systems and moving towards that. And I think that's, as commissioners, we will be looking at that, about what is our next phase of integration and how do you achieve that greater system integration. I think it is about how we join up the community and the acute far more, and there's various models to do that, and we touched on that last time, but also crucially how you build primary care in. And your third question was, will they look at primary care? Absolutely, they will look at primary care as well, and they're part of the process. In terms of the money, you're absolutely right. The IBC, the additional funding for social care, 5.8, then goes down to 3.2, and then 1.8 in the final year. So it is a decreasing pot. We are absolutely making sure that those schemes that are coming forward are absolutely recognising that as well, Councillor Tuffin, that they take into account that the money may or may not be there. We are still hopeful that the government's green paper will give us a longer term funding settlement for adult social care, because that is clearly needed as well. So I think it happy to bring back to overview and scrutiny the Better for Care Fund plans, because as they're starting to form, I think you'll want to see the impact, and then your question back to me is the sustainability of those schemes as well. But we are trying to, wherever possible, to pump prime things to get those kick starts and then tail off during those years as well. But we are investing quite widely in those schemes. So we've invested in social prescribing to wrap around primary care. We've invested something in frailty nurses in the front door of Derriford, which we think is a really big scheme. Derriford's doing some work around GP streaming, which will absolutely help at the front door. They've been really proactive with that. We're co-locating Live Well South West services and the acute services on the same. Sorry.
Don't forget Robin.
Don't forget Robin. So we're starting to co-locate services. Should have said something. I don't know. I was in full flow then. I've lost my flow. I've run out of things to say now. You'll be glad to know, won't you?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask a quick, the new post, is that in place and how long's it been in place that stretches across both areas?
So the post is relatively new. It must be about a month now. It's somebody called Jo Beer. We don't normally like to name drop in these meetings, but she's works for the trust, but is a joint appointment between the two. She's interim while we test that, because we wanted to get something out quite quickly. And already I think it's fair to say she's making an immediate impact and starting to really challenge us working as a system and driving through system change.
I want to ask David to come in first, because he got there before you, Carol, but then you could say your two pennyworth afterwards.
I always say, ladies.
No, thank you, Chair. I'd pick up on a very important point that you made, Councillor Tuffin, about it comes back to the funding, doesn't it? And it's great that we've had this additional funding coming in, but it's disappointing, I suppose, that it's time limited over 3 years. So you asked a very pertinent question about, is integration working? And I think I would use this as an example to say, from my point of view, yes, we are far more advanced, as you know, with the integrated fund, as to when we sit down to talk about what are the best outcomes from this year's 5.8 million, that we've already got the Finance and Assurance Review Group in place. So I'm able to have conversations with Ben Chilcott from CCG, and we're able to then report through to a single point, if you like, Craig, as straddling both organisations. So from that point of view, I think the negotiations and the conversations about the investment have been much easier, much smoother, and we're further ahead than anybody might be. I'd pick up on the other point as well. Got everybody in a room, we kind of jokingly call it a dragon's den. It wasn't that at all. It was about just getting finance handle on where the money was going. So we got the people who were bidding for the money to come in and say, this is how much I want. And the crucial question always was, that's great, but what is the outcome? So if we give you 50,000 in year one, you can't expect us to keep giving you 50,000 because the pot runs out. So you have to be giving us some benefits to the whole, to the whole system to make that £50,000 investment worthwhile. So I think there's a lot going on, and I have already pledged, I think, when we've been talking about the integrated fund, to say quite happy to come back with a detail about where that funding is going. But I think that's the crucial point, that yes, integration, can be seen as a positive, and I hope that CQC pick up on that it's much easier to have these negotiations, and quite happy to say we're not just handing money out. Let's be clear on that. There's got to be an outcome and there's got to be a benefit. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Chair. And I never assumed you just hand money out anyway, David.
Carol?
Thank you. Mine's a response around this integration. Is it working as well as we hope? I think the problem that we've got when we're trying to explain where we've got to and is it working as well is, I think you all understand how big and how complex the integration that we undertook. And you know, you've heard David and Craig both talking a bit around the integrated commissioning. That was one aspect, with all the funding coming together. We'll have a story to tell about that. We'll have one story to tell around integrated delivery, which was initially putting the social care into Live Well. Okay. What that then highlights is, what do you do next on that journey? How do you integrate the acute, the community health and social care and primary care into the next integrated offer? You cannot do everything in one go because it's so big. You've heard today about integrated children's. We've got all those things going on as well. And so our integration story is probably bigger in one go than most other local authorities and health communities have tried to do. And everything is at different stages. And so in an ideal world, we would have loved to be able to come here and say, it's fine, everything's wonderful, everything's fully integrated. But we're actually only 2 years in still. We'll show lots of things that have started to really bite, and there'll be other things that we need to do even more on. And we'll probably be coming back with yet more business cases.
Can I just pick up on Ian's point, in actual fact, and the integration of health and adult social care? We know what we're doing best for Plymouth, but are our partners still happy with the vision of it? All our partners.
Sorry, could you just say that?
Yeah. Are they quite happy with the vision of the integrated health and adult social care?
It's always difficult to speak for others, isn't it, Councillor James? I think one of the key tests of the CQC review, and it will probably come out on that, is around whether people's got a shared vision across the system. So they talk a lot about this relational tool where they go and talk to others as well. Some of the workshops will say, what is your shared vision, etc. What I do think every single partner I come across is absolutely passionate about improving services, improving outcomes for vulnerable people. And that's the glue that unites us all together. So that's a vision we've all aspired to. That's the thing that gets everyone out of bed in the mornings as well. So that's absolutely consistent. That's whether it's in the trust, commissioners, the voluntary community sector. It's about improving people's lives. We are all wedded to that vision.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald?
Thank you, Chair. Craig, on page 42 of the pack, I thought I'd do a bit of integration. We have referral to treatment percentage seen within 18 weeks. We appear to have almost triple that. What is the relationship between that paragraph and emergency admissions aged over 65?
That's the performance thing. That's the next.
Oh, is
that's
it?
the next item.
All right.
Yeah.
I just wonder. Okay.
But I don't know. Can you?
We're talking about elderly people here, over 65.
No,
So
the paper that we're dealing with is the paper on the CQC at the moment. That is the bit that you've just quoted
I thought we'd
there.
moved on. I'm sorry.
No,
I really
no,
thought
we're
we
still on the
had. Still talking about
CQC.
integration and
No, we're still on the CQC at the moment.
okay. Well, I'll wait. Do you want me to wait or?
Can I just point out that the next item and the item after, you should have been coming to the committee clerk to let them know if you had any issues about it, because there is no officer here to answer that. That is the standard thing that we say to you, that items, and I'm just trying to think what the next two items, there should have been questions raised. All right, so it was in the email that came out, so anyway,
I'll
right.
withdraw it if you like.
Yeah, it's probably best to at the moment,
Yeah, okay.
Sue. We'll get an answer for you, but it'll be after the meeting, certainly. All right, no problem. Councillor Dan.
I thought Sue was going to ask this question. Well, no, it's more. You started talking about the timeline of results, and I was just a little bit concerned when you said that they're coming to do this review. We're not going to get penalised, are we? Because some of these things you can't fix in 6 months. Because I thought, Sue, we chatted earlier on about workforce development, saying you're not going to get that done in 6 months. And with the, I hate to say it, with the current political climate and Brexit and all the stuff that I hear in the news about people, about people not coming, whether that's going to have an impact. So that was one question. So it was the timeline for sort of projects that might take more than 6 months to start showing a result. Because you said, Craig, hopefully that we can show that we're beginning to improve. Well, it takes 3 or 4 months, isn't it, to get any sort of cultural change, was the second bit. And then the third bit was, are the health and wellbeing hubs part of this integration project? Because I went to a consultation meeting in my own ward actually last week, and I'm hoping that at some point that consultation is going to come back to scrutiny, because I had 110 questions that the poor people at Healthwatch couldn't answer, which is fair enough because they're doing the community engagement. But there are some issues around that in terms of what those health and wellbeing hubs are set to achieve, and are we managing people's expectations properly? But that's for another thing. But is that part of this project as well? Because it is preventative, especially around things like mental health.
So the review will look at two things. One, that is what services are already in place. So in that case, it won't be. And then what our future plans are as well. So they will be looking at what our future plans are going forwards as well. So we will clearly outline to them what the plans are, etc., what the models are, and the engagement process we're going through. The timing for that consultation, I think, is probably around December that it concludes, Councillor Dan. So we won't have the full outcomes in time for CQC on that, so we'd have to describe the approach that we're going through on that and the vision. But they will want to look at already the range of preventative services that are in place as well, and test some of those as well, because there are some places that are almost nearly, if you want to be aspiring to be a hub as well, but it's what additional services that we may or may not put in there. So that will be part of it. And I forgot the first question, sorry.
Sorry, Craig, it's about workforce. Just that, we know that we've got workforce issues, and that there's no way that's going to be, managed and to overcome that within the first 6 months. It's long term, but those workforce issues are likely to get worse rather than better under the current climate, when we know we've got European nurses and that who are no longer applying to come to the UK.
So I would agree. I mean, some of the changes will we're developing plans and have developed plans for a while, and some of those will take a while to come fruition. I think my first point was some of the indicators are starting to show an improvement, which is helpful and hopeful that they'll be maintained as well, but these things are often variable. I think the workforce plans will take longer to develop. At conference we talked with others, and nobody across the system we spoke to really have got this completely nailed down, this whole system workforce development plan. As an STP, we're starting to work more closely, but it does take a while. I think the key for us is to recognise, I think, that there are workforce issues and how best we're trying to mitigate that as well. So what services can we wrap around primary care to mitigate some of that impact as well? But it will take us a while to get some of those plans in place.
Can I just come back to one thing? So when it says in here then that short focus report, letter with advice for the Area Health and Wellbeing Board, some of these are nationally not resolvable. So is this good? So could actually, the outcome of this review actually support what local authorities have been saying for a long time, that it is a funding issue, it is about training, it is about getting enough people in the system, and then hopefully that might reinforce the argument back to central government that we need more money to do it?
I'm not so sure.
We're broken as an at that level is what
I'm not so sure the reports will be constructed in that way. I think it will absolutely show what's working and what the challenges are. And the best thing I would do is probably direct people to the Holton report, which starts giving you that as well. CQC will be balanced. They won't come with a political perspective at all. They've been very clear on that. They will set out what the challenges are of a system, but they will have no political point at all. And so I don't think it will say everything's down to one thing. I think it will give us a wide-ranging picture of our local system. That's what we hope, of the good points, the challenges, etc. And some of those we think are system challenges, and we hope CQC acknowledge that as well.
Carol, just before you come in, what we'll do is we'll put a link to the Holton report. We'll get that sent out to you later on today. Or perhaps tomorrow. It might be tomorrow. But yeah.
So one of the other things CQC are going to do, they'll issue the short focus report to each of us. When they've done the first 12, they're going to pull together the themes and publish that as a national report on the themes that they've got from the first 12. Now, in that, I suspect there will be themes coming out that will go to a variety of places, but we won't be able to gauge those until we start to see a few more, because the only one that's out at the moment is the Holton one.
That's good, because then you've got an independent person sort of saying, yes, this is the theme that local government has been putting through. And so I think it actually could be good to have the review.
Let's live hopeful. Councillor Bridgman.
If you allow me, thank you, Chair. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here. I'm sat here and I'm looking at the ward boards. We are responsible, we are partners. The fact is we have an ageing population. I've experienced firsthand, very recently, bed blocking with my mother-in-law. She was in hospital for 5 weeks, didn't need to be. And the reason, there was nowhere for her to go with my father-in-law, been married 60 years, so this is personal. I'm also Vice Chair of Planning Committee. I'm just wondering if what we can do to really make this better. Do we need more care homes built? Do we need more sheltered housing, more pathway flats? When was the last time a bungalow was built? I mean, the Planning Committee are going on about this. We don't build bungalows anymore. We build student accommodation. Instead of thinking about all our students, we've got lots of student accommodation. Why aren't we building care homes, places where the elderly can live together? They've been married 60 years. They cannot find a care home for them anywhere in Plymouth together. So at the moment, they are blocking a pathway flat. And I'm very aware of this, and I'm very conscious and very embarrassed about it, but I'm going to put it here on the table because I think someone needs to talk to the planning officers and say, where are the bungalows? Where's the sheltered housing? You've got a massive list for sheltered housing. So I know this is not really what we're talking, but actually in an indirect way, it really, really is. It's something I'm quite passionate about and I'd love to get more involved with. But obviously, it's not really my role. So what can we do to make it better? Thank you.
Oh, I would say it is your role as the Vice Chair of Planning. I don't see any reason why why you and Councillor Wiggins can't be going to your offices and saying, let's do some summit about what we can do or with building contractors, etc. Yes.
Can I just come in actually, because in Glenhull recently we had the Millstones Hotel which is being demolished, and they're going to build 12 townhouses. My residents were absolutely up in arms, but when we actually met with the developer at planning committee, I made the fact about bungalows. It'd be nice if there were 3 bungalows, and he said, yeah, no problem with that because they'll sell like hotcakes. And he changed his plans to accommodate this. So perhaps we should be talking to more developers through the care sector. And I'm blushing now because I'm going on a bit, sorry.
I've got Councillor MacDonald, then Councillor Toohey. Councillor MacDonald? No.
Just like to actually say that I did challenge Mr Barnard last week actually, and said to him that across the whole of the country, but I'm really interested in Plymouth, we want some more age-appropriate dwellings. So could he work with developers to make sure that happens? I can't guarantee it, but I have raised it.
So maybe we want to put that down as a recommendation to come out of here today, folks. I mean, I know it's a little bit tangent, but, you know, I think we echo that. Carol?
Yeah, just to say, it is really appropriate about having a whole range of things. The one thing that I would say this city has embraced and done really well is the extra care housing. We've got 9 schemes, we've got another one coming online. They are appropriate, they do hold, you know, people can go in them together. They do have care and support. It's not the answer for everybody, but they are a very, very, very useful part of our complete toolkit then in terms of all the things we need. We do need residential and nursing home. Craig could talk to you in a lot of depth about residential and nursing home. It may be that we need some different types of residential and nursing home, but of course our starting point all the time will be home first, and you should only be in residential and nursing if it is absolutely necessary. We have a pretty vibrant market, but we have some probably a couple of gaps. Would that be fair, Craig? Better at this than I am.
Yeah, we absolutely think dementia nursing is an emerging gap as well, and as we're planning for the future, that is one which we would absolutely support. More extra care will be coming online as well, but I would also make the point though, at the moment we have still got we have got delays in intermediate care beds as well, and if we get those people in the right places as well, that should free up capacity. So it's good to look at the whole system as well. But appropriate housing is really important, so it's a legitimate challenge, I think.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point of information on the care home issue is one that developers did listen to us in Mill Bay as ward councillors to say that we'd like an extra care facility so that we localise it more for people. And so there is one being built there. So you can use planning through Section 106. My question is to further explore, Chair, the issue of workforce development. You've got an ageing population, an upward trend for ageing, shrinking resources, and I'd quite like to know what are we doing about elevating care across the piece for job opportunities within the city, linking it to the economy. Post-Brexit, there may well be an exodus of staff working in care homes who no longer want to remain. And also, I think it's significant, the fall in bursaries, because a lot of nurses work in care homes, qualified nurses. The implications for the loss of bursaries and the dramatic fall in nurses making application to join the profession. And I just want to see what this authority can do and how it can use its influence to future-proof and at the same time raise some standards and make it into a proper career pathway.
I'd like to kick off there. We do have an annual job fair in the Guildhall that's always well supported by providers, and we do actually go through a whole career pathway with carers. So someone could come in sort of like at a basic level, but we do actually highlight and we do promote constantly through our Quake team the whole career pathway that's there. So we do encourage our carers to not just to stay on that basic level, but to sort of like, you know, promote themselves with support from obviously the providers and ourselves. As far as nursing is concerned, I'm sure I've read somewhere quite recently that we're going to be offering more training posts to actually get people on the pathway from the university. So I think at the moment we just do one intake a year. Personally, I've asked some of the lecturers in the post at the university, could we not look at perhaps 2 entries a year? Because apparently I am told there are more people who apply than there are places. But if you have to wait another 12 months before you apply again, probably, I mean, you can't just sit at home and do nothing. Whoever's applied has gone off and found something else to do and are not coming back in again.
Thank you for that. Tina, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up what Councillor Bridgman was talking about, and I agree with her entirely in the long term, but it does strike me that one of the blocks for all this is actually providing equipment in homes for when people go back. About 18 months ago, I fractured my knee, and I was determined to go home, and luckily I could, but I'm in the older age bracket, and it was my good luck that I had been moved into a house which was already age adapted. It had everything in it that I needed, and so all I had to do was to prove I could use crutches and go up and down a few steps, and they waved me goodbye very happily, and I went home. However, had we not had that, the time it would have taken to apply, to have all this, the railings, the non-slip floors, everything that I needed put in, would have been longer than my recovery. And I would probably have been in that hospital or care home for 6 weeks. And I have met because I live in an over 55s estate now, that I have met 1 or 2 other elderly residents who have had exactly the same problems. One of whom was it took so long to have standard lifts and things put into her house that she never got home, but unfortunately she passed away in the care home. And it does seem to me that that is where the block is, and I would hope that there'll be some way of improving it.
And presumably this is all what the CQC is going to be looking at during that visit, as to how we make life easier for people, for us to get people out, and where the funding comes in, and making sure it's in the right place, and all of that. So it's going to be an intriguing report to read at the end. Okay, anybody else with any questions? John?
Clarification, really. Presumably, we need to be moving towards more weekend discharges, because that will help the overall pattern. But I do think actually we need to do some public relations work there, because I seem to have heard, well, they're sending people home out of hours, and some people include weekends in that. I think in some ways it's a good time to send someone home. They may have more family available or whatever, but that's one of our blocks, is it? And if we can improve that and get more people out at weekends, but it's difficult because you've got to have the backup services, then our overall figure will improve, presumably. Is that how it will work?
So through the system improvement board, Rob's challenged Live Well and the Trust to make sure that we enhance our staffing levels over weekend around discharges. On the back of that as well, some of the additional adult social care money will be used to support the Red Cross to be a 7-day service, and then things like domiciliary care 7-day, and building on the previous point is to make sure that equipment's available 7 days as a week as well, so that we've absolutely got all those things in place as well. But it will take time to scale up, but getting assessments done over the weekends and those packages of care absolutely needs to be in place, because that helps us on a Monday and Tuesday to really start the week in a good position.
So have we noticed that over 65 emergency admissions are rising with the problems within GP primary care? Have we noticed that those numbers are going up?
So through the System Improvement Board, we're starting to look at that data at that level of detail, Chair. And there's certainly some emerging evidence, and I think it's that because these things always need testing more so that there is a correlation between primary care and admissions to the front door of Derriford as well. So that's an emerging hypothesis that we're currently testing.
And you were saying about equipment and whatever, so are we going to be thinking about contracting with Millbrook to see if they're available at the weekend? Because obviously if somebody's looked at Friday afternoon, if we haven't then got Saturday at least to get equipment out to them, then that could delay something.
Yeah, I mean the trusts have stores as well to get people out as well, but we are looking at about how we enhance both the weekends but also evening services as well for community-based as well, because it's also people who are in crisis, so that we stop people going in as well. And so if our crisis response teams identify somebody to do that, there are stores within the major centres which aids that flow as well. The issues we've got more generally is around disabled facilities grant as well, which is the big structural changes to the places which do take longer as well, and that's why things like pathway flats are in place as well.
Can I just follow up what Craig's saying there, because that last point is so important. Inevitably, when we see all of the press coverage of this, it is all about the delayed transfers of care. There is as much emphasis in this CQC review about what we're doing to avoid admission into the hospital, and there's going to be a lot of attention on that. So everything that we're doing in the community and the work on this frailty hub, etc., is as important. Once somebody's in the hospital, we've got to get them out quickly and promptly and into the right place. But we've got to stop them going in there. That is the fundamental bit. And it's so easy to focus on the delays when actually the more we do at the other end, the better.
The other thing I just wanted to check out, are things working out properly with the reablement because of, the 91-day readmission, etc. Is that working?
I think we benchmarked quite well on that. We've set ourselves a very challenging target, and that's right. The key thing for us with reablement, Chair, is we need to maximise it more, and we're not at the moment. So that's how we, in terms of that home first philosophy, how we really maximise reablement. So for me, that's the real challenge that we need to do, and we haven't quite got that at the moment. So it will be an area of focus, both from a commissioning and a provider perspective.
So after the 91 days, if somebody then gets a reduced service, shall we say, can they then ask for a reassessment at any time if they feel whatever we've put into place isn't sufficient? We're not leaving somebody dangling and not able to cope properly.
So the 90 days indicator is whether they're still living independently after that. Reablement generally goes in, which should go in for a period of 6 weeks. That's the ideal time. Not set in stone, but that's the time we aspire to as well. And at that point, there should be an assessment of, the onward care package at that point should have been put in place as well. So it's that 6 week point is pivotal to us. You start that review way before, so you get them out within 6 weeks as well. But yes, clearly someone can come back to the service. Hence, Carol's point's really pertinent. That crisis response in the community is absolutely something we need to strengthen. I think Carol's point is one of the key messages we keep saying. This isn't all about delays, it's about whole system working. Delays is a really important part, but so is admissions avoidance schemes and how they're maximising keeping people independently in the first place.
Right, anybody else with a question? Well, we wish you well with what happens over the next few weeks. I shall look forward with bated breath to my interview with them. I think it's something like on the 14th of November, something. So, but we will await the result at the end. But if there's, if we can help in any respect, please get back to us. Right. Well, thank you very much indeed for coming along. Gratefully appreciated. We have some recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. From the basis of the discussion today, it seems like the committee wishes to make 3 recommendations. 1 for the resulting improvement action plan as a result of the CQC review report come back to the committee to review progress on implementation. 2, to bring back to the committee at the appropriate point the Better Care Fund plan in order to assess issues of sustainability in the context of decreasing funding. And 3, to look at age-appropriate dwellings, particularly for over 65s, to help people transfer from hospital to a safe environment appropriate to their needs.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Anything else that anybody wants to add to that list? No? Right. Oh, no, I'm just... The wellbeing hubs, yes.
Just to make sure that when we get the full report and we move it forward onto the business case, that we scrutinise the results of the public consultation and look at the impacts moving forwards.
What we're going to do is take that separately and add that onto the work programme as a separate item, separate to this, because it is separate. Yeah. Okay. Can I thank you very much indeed for coming along? Gratefully appreciated. Okay, we have items. I've got actually 7 here, but is it 7? I've got lost track. No, it's moved on now, hasn't it? Yes, items 7 and 8 are the integrated systems, etc. It sounds like we need to send you out reminders that these are for your for you to review, and if you then find any questions you need to be answered, to let us know, because we don't have the officers here to answer the questions unless you highlight things, please, folks. So we will try and do better for the next meeting. I think that's reasonable. And are we going to say that they go to Ross in future for any comments that you want to make on them? Okay. It's a sneaky way of testing that you've read your papers, isn't it, really? Let's be honest. And, you know... Okay. Yeah. No, Sue, we accept that. You're subbing. That's not a problem. You know.
And she does a very good job.
You're excused on that. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is the work programme. And bearing in mind, yes, Sue, we'll be adding the bit about health and wellbeing hubs. Yeah. What we'll do is we'll find out when that consultation is finished, and then if we can get it to the December's meeting, then that's our next meeting, so that will be useful.
The consultation finishes and they're hoping to get the reports done by December, but whether they will or not, it's a lot of work for them to do. They have to do 12 reports. Yeah. Yeah, and it's only a 3-month process, and that's not just to include the public consultations, also to include the writing up of the reports.
I think what we'll do is we'll find out what the time frame is. I think one of the comments that I would say is that some of the timing of the meetings weren't particularly conducive to members of the public going, because, you know, for instance, in our ward it was 1:30 on a Friday afternoon. I would suggest there's not a huge number of the population that would be around at that time to be able to go to something like that. So I think we'll get Ruth here to ask.
In some way, Chair, it might be better to wait for them to write up the report and then see what the outcomes are, or what the proposals are because I would have 110 questions to ask, honestly, because it was so wide in scope and not particularly well targeted.
We'll raise it with Ruth to ask her when it's going to be ready, and either the December or the February meeting, whichever is the most appropriate. Ian, you look as though you're dying to come in on something.
No, I had a briefing on it recently, and it's my understanding that we're at a very, very early stage of health hubs, and the consultation is just a small part of the whole planning process. So I just throw that in so you're aware that I have looked at it, and I think we need more information on the whole concept rather than the consultation.
Yeah.
I think the consultation is important, but I don't think that's kind of the nitty-gritty that we need to look at.
Yeah.
So we'll take it from that angle then, and say that we'd like an update as to what's happening, etc. Okay, and invite her along. Yeah. Right, we definitely need to be looking at the primary care services. There's no two ways about it, and it's been something that we've wanted to do for a while, and I think we have to. We've let things settle so that primary care plan has been put together by the CQC and NHS England. So I think now is the time to be looking into that in more depth. I had put 2 PIDs in earlier on this year. One was to look at a dementia-friendly city, and has that us sort of being a dementia-friendly city. What difference has it made to the actual, to people out there? Has it made a difference? We've worked hard as a council to try and do that. So, I just think we need to be looking at a scrutiny into that. I don't think it has to be a huge scrutiny, but I think we need to look into that. And secondly, the other thing that I have concerns about is end-of-life care. It's something that we know that everybody is going to need, and I feel quite passionately that I would like us to look at Plymouth.
Select committee.
So I think we need a short, sharp scrutiny on that. And obviously, if any of you have got any things that you would like us to put a PID together about, please let us know. The paper is on the council website, the councillors section, so people can put a PID together if they have something they want. It doesn't have to be a member of the committee, it can be any councillor can put something together. Or if you hear something via your community that you feel you want to put something together for them and help them, just let us know. Ross and the team will help put something together if somebody doesn't know how to do that. But I think it's important that we scrutinise things that will make a difference, and it affects people's lives. Yes, as David says. The other thing that we need to add into our work programme is the Community Safety Partnership. This is one of those things that's under our remit, and I think certainly by the end of the year, or I say by the end of the year, I mean April's sort of the civic year, I think we need to be getting the Community Safety Partnership in. If you think about our looking into the SARC, the sexual health assault thing. We need, that's all part of the Community Safety Partnership. I noticed that Mr. Thorne claimed that he had got the change to the SARC in Plymouth, but I'm sorry, I think he was lucky I left before question time, because I would have challenged him on that. But, considering we know that not everybody is being referred into that team. So I think we will challenge them on the safety partnership as to what's happening there. And obviously the CQC review we will need to look at. So it's all part. So we will update the work programme and again get that out to you. But let's make sure that people realise we've got teeth. All right. So thank you all very much indeed. Anybody got anything they want to add to the work programme that you've noticed a hole in the work programme? Nope. If you think of anything, let me know. All right. So thank you all very much indeed for your contributions this afternoon. I certainly think we've had a good afternoon's work. Thank you very much indeed. See you soon.
And thank you for chairing it so well.